The Navy SEAL training hall echoed with the sound of boots dragging across the floor. Recruits filed in after another brutal day of running, swimming, and obstacle drills. Their bodies ached, uniforms soaked with sweat and seawater. But when they entered the classroom, the chatter began almost immediately. At the front stood a woman, petite, auburn hair tied neatly in a bun, glasses perched on her nose, no uniform, no trident, no ribbons or medals. She looked more like a college lecturer than someone qualified to train America's toughest warriors. "Cute professor," one recruit muttered under his breath. Another smirked. "Wrong building, ma'am." Even their class leader, towering 6'4" Merrick Davenport, the strongest of the group, folded his arms and sneered. "We're here to fight, not sit through psychology class." The men chuckled. Their laughter carried the arrogance of warriors who had bled in the surf and sand. To them, strength meant survival, and in their eyes this woman looked like she didn't belong. But in the weeks that followed, those same men would fall silent. They would watch her dismantle their assumptions one by one. They would see scars she didn't mean to show. They would hear stories she never intended to tell. And by the time their commander revealed the truth, not one of them would ever underestimate her again. Coronado's Naval Special Warfare Training Command was the cradle of hardship. Every candidate who walked through its gates knew pain, exhaustion, and fear. But none expected to find Dr. Elaine Thorne waiting in their classroom. Training Officer River introduced her with clipped precision. 4 hours a week, asymmetric warfare theory mandatory. Groans rippled across the room. Theory? To men forged in mud and fire, theory sounded like weakness. Davenport spoke for them all. "With respect, ma'am, the enemy doesn't care about lectures when bullets start flying." Dr. Thorne's eyes didn't flinch. Calm, unshaken, she simply gestured toward him. "Show me your room-clearing procedure, trainee." He moved with flawless precision, textbook perfect. His footwork sharp, his grip steady, his angles tight. When he finished, a few recruits clapped. "Excellent," she said softly. Then her voice sharpened. "Textbook, but fatally flawed." For 10 minutes she dissected his technique. Every blind corner, every funnel of fire, every gap the manuals never mentioned. The smirks faded. Davenport clenched his jaw, but he said nothing. Then, as she erased the board, her sleeve slipped. A jagged scar wrapped around her wrist. She tugged the fabric back quickly, but not before one recruit, Calloway, noticed. His eyes narrowed. She wasn't just talking theory. She had lived something. Day after day, Dr. Thorne pushed them. Not in pull-ups or push-ups, but in ways that rattled their confidence. She spoke of perception bias, hesitation under stress, the fatal mistakes caused by over-reliance on muscle alone. Davenport bristled. "We need to be stronger, faster, more aggressive. That's what keeps us alive." Her reply was a dagger wrapped in silk. "The strongest man I ever knew died because he couldn't adapt." The room stilled. She said it with the weight of someone who had been there. The recruits grew restless when she introduced sensory manipulation drills, strobe lights, distorted sounds, disorienting illusions. Within minutes, candidates who prided themselves on endurance stumbled like rookies. "This isn't training," Davenport muttered. Her eyes hardened. "Ramadi, 2012. 3 operators killed. Enemy used these exact tactics. Strength couldn't save them. Training like this would have." Silence. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. By the 3rd week, resentment boiled over. A crude drawing appeared on the whiteboard, her scrawny and weak being carried by real soldiers. She erased it without a word, but Calloway noticed the faint tightening of her jaw. That afternoon, she divided them into teams for another drill. Every team failed. Every man left humiliated. At the end, she stood tall and spoke calmly. "Your bodies are strong. Your minds are not. That changes now." Davenport couldn't take it anymore. After another lecture, he stood. "With respect, ma'am, you've never seen combat. You don't know what it's like out there." Her hand paused on the marker. She didn't argue. She simply said, "Let's continue." That dismissal burned him. Hours later, he confronted her as recruits lingered in the doorway. His voice dropped, sharp as steel. "You're teaching warriors theories that could get us killed. You don't belong here." Her gaze stayed steady. Leadership isn't about being the loudest or strongest. It's about knowing when strength fails. Something inside Davenport snapped. He slammed her against the wall, one massive hand gripping her throat. Gasps erupted around the room. "This is combat, Professor. Violence, threats, not your books." For one frozen second, she didn't resist. Her eyes locked on his, cold, assessing, and then everything changed. In a blur, she broke his grip, twisted his arm, and drove him to the floor. A sickening crack echoed as his shoulder dislocated. In seconds, the strongest man in the room was immobilized beneath her knee. The recruits stood in stunned silence. The door opened. Commander Blackwood stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "At ease, Major." The word cut through the room like thunder. "Major," whispers rippled. Davenport's jaw slackened. Blackwood continued, his voice heavy with authority. "Gentlemen, meet Major Elaine Thorne, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, call sign Wraith. 15 years in combat, Silver Star, Purple Heart, and the only survivor of Operation Iron Dagger." The recruits froze. Everyone had heard the whispers about a classified mission gone wrong, a SEAL team lost in flames, but no one ever knew who survived. Until now. The quiet woman with glasses, the professor, the one they mocked, Wraith. From that day forward, everything changed. Training became war in miniature, blindfolded obstacle courses, simulated hostage rescues under disorientation, weapons failures mid-mission. She stripped away their reliance on muscle, forcing them to adapt, to think, to survive with nothing but their minds. Davenport, his arms strapped in a sling, transformed the most. The man who once ridiculed her now listened intently. When he stumbled, he admitted it. When others faltered, he supported them. Pride gave way to humility. Her lessons sank deeper than tactics. They began to see the scars she carried, wrist, side, shoulder. Proof written on her body that every word came from battle, not theory. Late one night, Thorne found Davenport training alone, sweat dripping, adapting his drills to account for his injured arm. "Late evening, trainee?" she asked quietly. He didn't stop. "Yes, ma'am. Adaptation isn't optional anymore." For the first time, she allowed herself a faint smile. Their final evaluation pushed them beyond breaking. 6 hours of chaos, equipment failures, shifting leadership, civilians caught in crossfire, simulated injuries. But this time, they didn't collapse. They adapted. They rotated leadership seamlessly. They improvised weapons. They used terrain as an ally. Davenport's team excelled. When his shoulder slowed him, he passed command without hesitation. When others faltered, they stepped in. At the end, covered in sweat and grime, they stood as a unit transformed. She faced them, voice firm. "Today you proved that strength alone is never enough. When your body fails, your mind carries you home." Commander Blackwood stepped forward. "Major Thorne's program will now be permanent. You were the first class. You set the standard." Graduation arrived 6 months later. Families cheered as recruits received their tridents. Dr. Thorne stood quietly in the crowd, anonymous again, content to watch. When Davenport's name was called, Commander Blackwood's words rang out. "This man demonstrated humility, resilience, and tactical brilliance. He is proof that adaptation is survival." Davenport scanned the crowd until his eyes found her. He gave a sharp, respectful nod. When the ceremony ended, the recruits did something no one ordered. As she walked away, every new SEAL lined up, rendering a crisp salute. Silent, unshakable respect. At the end of the line, Davenport's voice carried softly. "Thank you, Major, for teaching us that true strength isn't domination, it's adaptation." She returned the salute, precise and steady. "Remember that lesson. It will save you when nothing else can." As the sun set over Coronado, Major Elaine Thorne, Wraith, slipped away quietly, her scars hidden, her story untold. She left behind no medals, no speeches, just a legacy carried in the minds of warriors who would never forget her. Because they learned what every soldier must. The mind is the sharpest weapon. And sometimes, the one you underestimate most is the one who saves you all. If this story moved you, honor the unseen warriors who carry scars the world never sees. Drop a salute in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Military Legends Untold for more stories of valor, sacrifice, and resilience.